Can you hear me now? All right. I was wondering, I didn't hear the echo, so I thought to myself, is it working? Did they just have it tweaked down or something, right? Well, good morning. It's great to be back in the Dallas-Fort Worth area from Medellin, Colombia. You know, it's very exciting to have been able to serve the Lord down there. But like I was saying, I've got a reminder to, follow up with what Brian said, that we need to try to come and... All right, listen. Wow, this one's hot. I can hold this one down here. A church that doesn't pray is one that will fall. Think about it. Shortly after the apostles and Peter, James, and John, the 12 disciples, they passed away. They went to be with the Lord. I think it was around 300 something AD. The church stopped fasting and praying. That's right about the time that we started seeing the miracles and signs and wonders out of the church start to dissipate. If we really want to start seeing a move of God in our city here today, in Trophy Club, Texas, in 76262, we have to begin to take an intentional approach to our life. We may even have to start modeling our church a little bit differently. When I was in Medellin, Colombia, I first stepped off the plane, and it was the first place I've ever been out of the country where I almost felt like I was at home. Normally, I don't feel that way. Normally, I feel an oppression, almost like a heaviness over the area. But there was such a peace around the airport. Now, it could be something to do with the fact that I grew up in the mountains, and when I looked out, I thought, wow, I am in a valley. And I love mountains, and I love the beach. So you put me in one of those two environments, and I'm extremely happy. Well, the jungle's another one. Jim and I can kind of relate on that one because we both feel at home down in Peru. But one of the things that I noticed down in Colombia is that about 75% of the church itself is actively engaged in work in the body. This is a brand new church. Most of the believers in this church are new to the faith. They're not long-termers. They're not 20, 30-year-old, in the faith. But a lot of times we think, well, you really need a mature church to get people engaged and plugged in. No. A lot of these guys are less than 2 years in the faith, some of them 6 months, and they have a 75% participation in being engaged in volunteering. Think about it. What if we had a 75% of us? Now, you may think, well, they're a large church. No, they're not. They have 2 services. One service, they have a max 80 because of the current building they're in. They can't have more than 80 people. The second, they have 50. So they're right about the same size we are. But they take a different approach. They think, okay, what can I do to be involved to make this thing grow? Another thing that I noticed while I was there is they have something called connection groups, which I haven't seen this model before. They go into the coffee shops of their city, and they begin just to post little Instagram posts, kind of like if Juan Carlos throws up an Instagram and says, hey guys, I'm over here with the coffee. He's got a picture with the coffee up, takes a selfie, says, we're having fun, we got a good conversation on anxiety today, come check it out. And that's all it says. And so they'll have a group of people from the church, and they'll take 30 minutes, 45 minutes, and they'll just let anyone popcorn that thing. Believer, non-believer, they don't care. Whatever, whoever. Just get them involved in the conversation. And at the very end, the leader of that group, in this case it would be Juan Carlos, he would stand up and say, okay, I've got a 2-minute message. Just listen to me for 2 minutes. It'll be a very intentional, very direct-to-the-point message. And they have won 80 to 90% of all of their congregation that way. Think about it. Outside of the box ideas. When I walked into the service today, that was the first thing that I heard in my heart. That the God is going to begin to birth out of the box ideas into our body. New ways to reach the community. Why? Because the ways we've been trying to do it for the longest time is not working. We're getting recycled church folks, and that's not what we're here for. We're here to reach the nation. Jesus said he came for the lost and dying, not the ones who are well. If Katie Grace, is, sitting on the side row and, we're trying to get her to come into a different church, that doesn't help anyone. That's just moving one person's tithe and attendance to a different location. But I know Jake is saved, but we're going to use Jake as an example. If Jake is not saved and he needs Jesus, and we find a way to reach him and we bring him into the kingdom, then we have affected the world for good. If we simply go through life chasing after other people that are of like faith, we're not doing our job. The Great Commission, a lot of times we forget, is not for the fivefold ministry. Oh, I know I'm stepping on some toes now. For too long, we have said, okay, Pastor, I'll bring them in, you go get them saved. That's not what the gospel says. The gospel says that at the time that Jesus ascended to heaven, that there was 170 people around him. That wasn't the 12, but a lot of times what you and I do is we say, okay, Jesus is ascending to heaven now, and we're seeing Peter, James, John, Titus. We're seeing the 12 in our mind, right? The same thing that happens whenever we hear about the day of Pentecost. We're thinking about the 12 apostles being at the day of Pentecost. Well, if we look at it, there is most likely about 120 people that were present on the day of Pentecost, but most of the time we ignored that. We don't look just one couple verses ahead. They were just voting to try to find out who the next apostle would be that would take Judas Iscariot's place. And in that one meeting, they had 120 people present, men alone, not counting women. And a lot of times, the only people we consider are the apostles. But the thing is the Word says that the fivefold ministry, it says in Ephesians, is set aside for the purpose of the equipping of the saints for the work of the gospel. Wow. That means if Juan Carlos is set aside as a pastor, his primary purpose is not necessarily to go and do the work, it's to train others to do that work. However, it doesn't exempt him as a member of the body, so he still should do the work. But he's not the sole purpose in doing it. How do we paint that picture on a practical level? If the fivefold ministry is the only one ever out there trying to win the lost, it's going to take an awful long time. And that's not what Jesus wanted. He wanted each and every one of us to have 3 or 4 people that we're pouring into and mentoring at all times so that we can turn around and have those people raised up to the point to where they can begin to get 3 or 4 people and mentor them up. Then you have a multiplication. A multiplication. But we don't see that in the church today. Why? Because we're too busy. We're not intentional. And I'm not trying to make this sound like I'm trying to get on to anybody. That's not my intention at all. My intention is I believe that the Lord is beginning to call each and every one of us out of our comfort zone right now. He's beginning to say, I want you to begin to be like Timothy and stir yourself up in the faith that God has given you when you received your salvation. Why? Because there's more in you. He called you to purpose. He didn't call you just to sit in a pew and be comfortable all day. He called you to have purpose in your workplace, in school, when you're at the bus stop, when you're in your car and someone just cussed you out. He has purpose for you everywhere you are for His kingdom. We're supposed to be ambassadors here on this planet. We're not supposed to simply just be churchgoers. I mean, if I sit there on the pew all day long and just say, God, I'm just a good Christian, I'm just going to sit there and tithe, and I'm going to do my part, I'm going to make sure my kids are taught well, that's good. But if my neighbor's going to hell, and when I go before the throne and I sit there and say, okay, Lord, I did my part, He goes, yeah, but you know, Bert across the street? Yes, sir. When did you ever tell him about me? You used to have conversations in front of y'all's houses for hours on end. When did you ever bring me up? When did you ever be intentional to get in the middle of his business, whether he liked it or not? But what happens? I'm guilty. We begin to worry about what other people think. We begin to get concerned about other things, and we're like, I don't have time for that. Well, I had time to talk about his foundation problems. I'm just being real. I had time to talk about the go-karts that he likes to ride, or the The motorcycles he loves to go joyride on. But, I didn't take time to talk to him about kingdom purpose. So who's guilty? Me or me? Right? But that's the decisions we all have every day. I mean, I have several guys that I manage at work as a project manager, and there's times in my day that I feel like the Lord's telling me, hey, get involved in their life. And I'm like, Lord, this isn't easy. I'm busy. I work. I've got kids. I have a wife. I have a ministry. But you're telling me to get involved in these guys' life? And some of them, Lord, they're messed up. And some of them's going to take some time, but he hasn't let me off the hook. So I've actually told my guys recently, okay, guys, once a month or so, we're going to just individually get together for lunches. We're just going to talk. Why? Because the Lord's been on me about being intentional with those around me. And I really believe the Lord is saying for our church that he wants to begin to birth new ideas in each and every one of our hearts that are going to begin to rock the seats of the nation. And it's going to begin to be almost like wildfire. Okay, it's going to be like that crazy guy that was smoking the cigarette and flipped it out the window and started the fire on the side of the road. Because our nation currently is dry. And all it's going to take is that one little spark to begin to ignite a fire in everyone's heart. But we have to be intentional. All right. I'm not going to preach too much. I wanted to give you all an update of the mission trip, so I'll try to temper it a little bit. All right. While we were there, we had two major goals. One was my friend had been bothering me harassing me, for about 1.5 years to go teach and preach at his church. He wanted me to do some equipping with his volunteers and his leadership team. So that was the number one thing that I started on the agenda. And then we learned about a foundation there in Medellin, Colombia, that helps to rescue children and young girls out of human trafficking. And we began that partnership there when I went this time. So it was a twofold trip. One was ministry, preaching and equipping and building people up. The other one was finding out about young people, some of them as young as 6 years old, that are being thrust into human trafficking. And now you and I tend to think about this idea that people are just being kidnapped and sold off, but the real sad thing is they have a cultural thing that's kind of come up in their environment, I guess you'd say, because the cartels used to kidnap people and force women into prostitution. That is true. But the government got control of the situation, and a lot of these people are in a very poor environment now, and they have no education, no trade, no understanding of what they need to do. So what ends up happening is the mother, the sister, or the aunt begins to push their daughters or their niece or their child into human trafficking, and they do it in such a way to where they make the child feel like it's their fault. They twist it to where they're like, okay, you got paid to do this, so this is on you. And that child begins to feel like this is all on them. Now, as we began to get to know the foundation, we asked them, okay, what's your success rate? And they were very honest with us. They said in the beginning, the success was very, very low. We were not having a very good success getting these kids to stay out of the situation. But then, fortunately, the lady who runs the foundation, she came from a social background to where she did a lot of social work, and she began to start doing a lot of investigation and digging. And she found, as she began to run all the numbers, that the families and the children that she began to work with both at the same time, there was a 90 to 95% success rate in turning those kids around. So that's where they begin to focus. They begin to focus on, okay, if we can counsel the child and we can counsel the family, and then we can get them both to understand there's a better way, then we'll partner with that family. We'll make sure that there's food, there's transportation and education for that family, and we'll begin to do it just like we eat an elephant, one bite at a time. So their purpose is to begin to change the dynamic of the culture in that poverty-riven area, one person at a time. or I guess even one family at a time. So that was extremely exciting. One of the things that I noticed, which was almost disturbing, is some of the conditions that some of these girls live in, though. You ever been down some of the alleyways downtown, Fort Worth or Dallas, real narrow areas? Well, it's like they've built houses between buildings, and they have like little single rooms, probably from me to that wall, square-wise, and up to 11 plus people will be in that one room. And that's their bed, their kitchen, everything in that one little square. And imagine, and I think a couple of y'all saw my nephew, and my nephew pointed out, he goes, there's a bunny rabbit in that room with all these kids. There's 12 kids, and there's a huge bunny. It's like a rodent in a room like that. Think about it. That's kind of nasty. Rabbits go to the bathroom everywhere they go. So these kids are living in extreme poverty to the point to where some of these streets, you walk down the street, and you literally see someone with a crack pipe in their hand smoking it. Now, that's not the normal in Medellin. These are the poor spots, kind of like going down the Bronx in New York probably, where you get in some really rough areas. But those are some real eye-openers, right? You get into some of those scenarios, you're like, wow, some of these people really need Jesus. And that's one of the areas that we're praying about with the foundation and with the local church. Now, when it comes to the church, the first night we minister to the volunteers. And we begin to talk to them about their identity, being set apart. You know, what does it mean to be used? And the Lord showed up. And I think Arian and I probably prophesied for 2 hours to people, just individually, one-on-one. And then Saturday morning, we had a men's group. Basically, and this is the shocking thing, we had 50 men show up for a men's breakfast. And these men were extremely interactive. As in the moment we did our teaching, I got to a point, Juan Carlos, you've been on the Bible study with me on Friday nights. We kind of had that same flow with it, where we had our teaching, and there was a point where I said, okay, guys, I'll call you out if you don't start talking. So we're going to start having a conversation here, safe place, let's talk. And we began to interact with these men, and it wasn't like one or two kind of little church mouse type hand. It was, hey, I want to ask a question, and they would take a microphone, and they would boldly ask the question. And there was a couple questions we couldn't address because they were very deep, and they'd go very long, and I was told we were going a little long. So we could not go quite as long. There was actually the point to where Jeff, who's the pastor there, he went to school with me to Christ for the Nations. He actually told me, he's like, okay, Kirk. He goes, this is really good. Your timing is great, but the men are really taking this long. We're going to have to try to cut this because the men will not stop. We're going to have to stop the service. So these guys are hungry for more of God. And remember, they're not like 20-year veterans in the church. Which brings up another thing. I think a lot of times you and I use a lot of church lingo, and we got to be careful with that. Because there's a lot of people that are in the world that when we say, you're sanctified or you're consecrated, they're like, you're what? We just need to say pure, clean, set apart. You know, make it simple. You know, if it's something that has to be used in a specific word, find a way to simplify it, explain it to them. Because if we don't, here's the reality. When we start bringing people in here that have no church background, they're going to look at all of us like we're crazy. And they're not going to fit in. They're not going to understand what's going on. Well, then Sunday, that was an interesting day. I didn't know it at the time, but I had 2 church services to preach. So I ended up doing 2 back-to-back services, and so that was pretty fun. We ended up praying. I taught on being filled with the Holy Spirit, and that really explained to people that when we're filled with the Holy Spirit, that it's like almost like Gideon when, the armies were thinned out. And God said, okay, take a clay pot. Go put a torch in that pot and throw that pot out. How that flame that's inside that clay pot is like the Holy Spirit that's inside of us. And then when we pray in the Spirit and allow Him to intercede through us and travail through us, it's as if we're throwing that pot, our body, out to be burst out on the battlefield before us, and where God can use our prayer language, our praying in the Spirit, as a weapon to go before us. Now, we don't always know what we're praying, but when we allow God to pray through us, He can break through an atmosphere in a way that you and I could never do it. It's like we give God permission to get in the middle of our business. Now, it was just incredible, though, watching God show up. I don't know about you guys, but I currently feel like God's taking me into a season that I don't really want to move into. Do y'all feel that way? You feel like God's about to move you into something that you don't want to do, where you don't want to go, that's uncomfortable? That's where I feel like I am. I feel like the Lord's saying, get out of your comfort zone. Begin to believe me for more. Begin to believe that I can meet that need whenever it's there. And I feel like the Lord is also saying that in this church that we need to begin to believe God for more, even here at Trophy Lakes. That we need to begin to see ourselves as a city on a hill. Why? Because He didn't create us to be hidden underneath a bushel. He doesn't want His light to be hidden, but instead He's created each and every one of us with purpose, like I said before, because we're supposed to be the thermostat to the atmosphere around us. If God created us to be a thermometer, that'd be easy. But He didn't. He called each and every one of us to disrupt the atmosphere. Why? Because His presence is supposed to be inside of us. If His presence is inside of us, then we are supposed to be the one that sets the tone to every atmosphere that we enter. That means that darkness could be right beside us, sitting in the seat beside us, but because God's light is in us, His light will prevail and run that darkness out. At least it'll keep it at bay. Why? Because God's great. God's strength will be all that we need. I mean, you can ask Jim if you ever want to have a conversation, if you haven't been down to the jungle of Peru. There's a couple demon-possessed people that walk right up to you, but if you let the light of God prevail, those people don't have any hold on you. We can't allow fear to dictate our actions, whether it be the fear of man, the fear of the supernatural, or the fear of failure. Because God has not called us to any of those things, not fear, not failure, or even to bow down to the other people, what they think, right? Or let's put it another way. We can't worry about what our spouse thinks sometimes too. And I know I'm meddling. Sometimes we can't care about what our children think. Because if God says you're supposed to begin to preach and teach, you have to take the initiative to do what He's called you to do. Or if He says, hey, I want you to start a Bible study. I want you to be intentional, and I want you to start a little small group in your house and begin to invite people from your neighborhood and be an agent of light where I've assigned you so that you can disrupt the atmosphere in your neighborhood. You never know. You might affect the next Billy Graham. The next Billy Graham might be your neighbor. But if we don't get intentional to disrupt the atmosphere around us, we can't set the tone. I mean, I don't know. I can see some change in my children. I can see some change in Jake. I even saw a little change in Katie Grace this morning and the light that they're carrying. But what happened? They became intentional over the week. They chased after God. They were serving Him every way they could. And because of that, God met them. But see, the Word says that if you draw near to me, I will draw near unto you. But a lot of times we do this number. I'm just awaiting, Lord. When you going to show up? But He's waiting for us to do this. God, I'm chasing you. Come, Lord. He wants us to be intentional with pursuing Him. If we're not willing to be intentional with our pursuit, why do we expect that He's going to move? And that's a fallacy that we have in our heart. We have this idea in our mind that, if I just exist, things are going to happen. It's like I've been teaching my kids lately. If you feel like you're called to ministry, if you're called to be a doctor or whatever, you can't just sit around. It's not going to happen by osmosis. Right? If you're called to preach, you need to study to show yourself approved. If you're called to be a doctor, you need to study to show yourself approved, and all of us will really thank God for it. I don't want any doctor cutting on me if they didn't study. I don't know about y'all. Maybe Brian. But Brian he's kind of quiet over there. I think he's okay with it, but I'm definitely not. I'd be a little concerned. But a lot of times that's the way we treat God, though. We're like, God, I know you're telling me you want me to move into the season, but we just sit there. And we just wait. And God's saying, okay, what are you going to do? The Word says that Jesus is seated at the right hand of the Father. What does that word seated mean? By the very nature of Him being seated, that means He has ceased action. Now, if you go a little further, it also says that Christ being the head and the church being His body. Now, that tells us that we as the body of Christ are the ones that are supposed to be doing the action on the earth. So that means my children, my wife, even Darren, Ryan, all of us, we're called to take action here on this earth. Why? Because if we don't take action, Jesus' work does not continue. But a lot of times we take this attitude like somehow He's going to reincarnate before He comes back for His church and begin to walk the streets of Trophy Club and begin to knock on everyone's door and say, hey, I need you to come. Come on. I need you to come. Come get to know me. But that's not what the Word says. The Word says that He's equipped us, the saints, through His fivefold ministers to do the work of the gospel, which means we have to get ourselves out there. We have to be a lot like Jim. We have to be intentional with our one-on-ones, right? We've got to find people to pour into, mentor. Why? Because you and I can sit here all day long. And I'll give you a perfect example. There's one woman, when we were out in the streets, going to the different areas, we were talking to these families. She was a single mom, and she had her kids in this really, really nasty, what they call it a shelter. It's really a hole in the wall with sewage running through the, anyway. She's there by herself. I can feel that she's open to the gospel. I can sense it in my spirit. But I heard the Holy Spirit kind of say, be careful. I'm like, Lord, what do you mean? And then I realized, follow up. If there's not follow-up, we can almost inoculate people to the gospel. If we begin to preach and say, hey, pray this prayer, and then they have no teaching, they have no mentorship, they have no pouring love of God into them, then what happens? They become like the seed thrown on the gravel or amongst the weeds, and they get choked out. And then they're like, I tried that. That didn't work for me. Is that what we're called to do? That's not what we're called to do. But a lot of times that's the attitude we have. I've done it when I was younger. I'd ask a friend, say, hey, you want to receive Jesus? Yeah, all right, great. We'd pray the prayer, and then we'd like, all right, yay. And then we're riding our BMX bicycles or whatever, running through the neighborhood. It was all good. Never once talked about Jesus again. But that's not what we're called to do. We're called to be intentional. It's like this. Hey, Brian, what you doing today? Let's do coffee. Hey, Jake, what are you doing this afternoon? You want to grab a bite to eat? Or just sitting down somewhere in a park and just having a conversation sometimes so that you can pour into someone with such intentionality that it affects their world. I've had people do that for me. When I was back in Tennessee, a gentleman that I used to go to church with, he got back in touch with me. And he and I began to meet for lunch on a semi-regular basis. means the world. I know Jim can tell you story after story about people that have told him the same thing, about how those intentional moments have made the world of difference for them. And every one of us are on different time scales, right? Or even levels of our life. But if we are chasing after the kingdom, and we're living with intentionality, and we're not allowing ourselves to be sucked into this whirlpool of life, allowing life to become the controlling factor, then we can allow Jesus to reign on this earth. One of the things that I noticed, though, while I was out there is that even in the midst of the filth, the cesspool areas, God's mercy was still at work. You know, He continued to bring light into those dark areas. And He basically raised up heroes to help go into those dark moments and pull these kids out of, I don't know how to say it nice in church, hell on earth. I guess that's the only way to say it. It's like a hell on earth. One of the children actually told the foundation, "You guys make me feel like I'm being pulled out of the trash can," and drew a picture of it. And they said, and he literally told, and this was a male child, and he told him, he says, "But I feel like my mom makes me be in the trash can." But those mercies that God shows, they never end. If we look at Lamentations 3:22 through 24, it says, "The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul, therefore I will hope in Him." Now, I think the last time I spoke to y'all, I talked to y'all about the love of God and the word chesed, right? Well, interestingly enough, and I started laughing when I read this because the word for steadfast love is chesed, which literally means it's a covenant between you and God. The chesed of God is a covenant love to where it's like He would chase after you no matter what. And that's the kind of love that I saw there in Colombia, where there are people that are raised up, go chase after those that are lost in that mire, in that muck, in that dirt. And God has made that way everywhere we go so that we are not going to be stuck. Now, I think there's a couple things we need to remember. Mercy fuels compassion. Think about it. When we have mercy, it by nature causes us to be compassionate towards those around us. It causes us to want to give when we don't necessarily want to give, right? If Katie Grace's car blew a tire, I hope it doesn't. I'm just using an example, Lord, this is not speaking in faith here. We don't want that to happen. But if it did, and I see it blow, then I'm thinking to myself, so it's really bad for her, right? No, but if I allow the compassion of God to get me in His mercy, I'll say, man, that's awful. I need to go pull over and help her. But how is it in the church many times we don't do that for other people? We might pull over and help someone change their tire, but if someone's struggling through life because they won't stop looking at porn, or they can't get away from alcohol, or they're hooked on crack cocaine, we don't want to get in the middle of all that. We don't want that drama. But that's what we're called to. We're called to get into the middle of someone's life. Mercy reflects kindness, almost a forward payment of forgiveness. What do I mean by that? And I know I'm picking on Katie Grace a lot. She's sitting on the front, so it makes it really easy. She's right here out of my peripheral view. But if I'm going to pay it forward, I'm going to forgive her before it happens. If I know that normally she calls me Kurt instead of Kirk, and it just rubs me wrong, and I'm going to say, you know what? I love Katie Grace anyway. I forgive her. We're going to let it go. It also helps with empathy, right? If we're merciful, it helps us to empathize with those around us. But mercy is a key characteristic of Christ. He was always merciful. He was always gentle, always gracious. There was such a goodness in that mercy that he had for us. When we have mercy, we choose not to be offended. We also learn what it means to see the hurt that's behind the hard words. Man, that's hard when it comes to marriage, isn't it? All of us that are married, think about it. When your spouse says something, they snap at you for real quick. Sometimes you look at the words, you don't think about the possible hurt they may have had that day. Why? Because you're close to them. Because you're close to them, they shouldn't snap at you. But human nature is sometimes when you've had a bad day, the people you love get the brunt of it. But mercy means that we sometimes say, you know what? I'm going to pick on my wife now. My wife must have had a lot of really bad calls today, so this is probably something from work. We're going to let that thing go. So, or it could even be the children, right? The kids had a bad day at school. They got an extra 2 essays they have to write before the end of the day. So they know they're not going to get any sleep tonight. So maybe they're reacting from that. But out of mercy, we allow kindness and grace to go before us instead of us reacting. Now, would anyone say that mercy is a characteristic of God? I would say it is. It's a deep character of God. Mercy's being patient. We can see this in James 3:17. But the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, reasonable, full of mercy and good fruit, unwavering and without hypocrisy. Now, mercy also comes back to helping others, right? So when we're merciful, sometimes, like I told you, my neighbor Bert, now he didn't ask me for help. I told him he should have. But like one day I was looking across the street and he almost had the fence completely redone by himself. And you guys, if you try to do that in the heat, you know that's difficult here in Texas. And but mercy is putting yourself in the other person's place and say, and I went up to him and said, Bert, next time you need to call me. You've got my phone number. Call me. Ask for help. That, to me, and that's another act of mercy we can do. I mean, some of y'all, maybe you prefer to help someone with their car, but you probably don't want me to help you work on your car. You might need another mechanic to come behind you, to help lay hands on that thing. But in Proverbs 3:27, it says, do not withhold good from those whom it is due when it is in your power to do it. Wow. Man, if it's in our power to do good, we shouldn't withhold it? I feel like God's meddling in my life a little bit there. How about you? Because sometimes it's real easy to get busy. Like I told you, as a project manager, my day is insane when I'm at work. My wife will try to call me, and an hour or two later, I might call her back because sometimes I get that busy. Meetings, fires you're putting out. But it doesn't exempt me, does it? Still have to respond to my spouse. So why do sometimes we feel like we can exempt God? Oh, Lord, I'll get that later. I'll deal with that later. Holy Spirit's kind of nodding his head saying, okay, we'll see how that works out for you, son. We'll see how that works out for you. But think about this. Even when we're doing these different things, we've got to watch our attitude. Because sometimes as we respond to others, we can even allow our attitude to kind of snap back just a hair. Even though we're trying to act in mercy, we can kind of give a little bit of an attitude, especially to our children sometimes. Nah, never mind. Romans 12:8 says, and he who exhorts in his exhortation, he who gives with liberality, he who leads with diligence, he who shows mercy, with cheerfulness. Ouch. So when I go help my neighbor with his car, his fence, digging a ditch, I got to be cheerful with it when I'm being merciful to help him. Man, I almost feel like I'm getting whipped up here. I don't know about y'all. Y'all seem like y'all are having a good time. I feel like I'm the one getting chastened here. I don't understand this thing. All right. So mercy even can mean giving people a second chance. Man. Some of us have had those moments where someone betrays us or, said some bad things against us. But we wanted to hold that grudge. We wanted to say no more, right? Sometimes that means we're supposed to say, you know what? I forgive you no matter what the situation is. I let it go, and I'm just going to allow God's grace to go over that. Ephesians 4:31 through 32 says, "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ also forgave you." So I guess that really means that we're supposed to do good to those that hurt us. When people hurt us, they injure us, they come against us, we're supposed to still love them. Think about Jesus on the cross, being crucified. Nails currently being put through his hands, and instead of cursing them, he's saying, God, forgive them. They don't know what they do. And yet many times when you and I allow ourselves to get so emotionally involved with something that we were attacked with or whatever, we allow that offense, that bitterness, that hurt to become almost a dam to the Spirit of God in our lives. What do I mean by that? When we allow offense, when we allow bitterness to come in, we can almost put a block on what God's trying to do in our lives. Because we have chosen to allow this bitterness to become a wall. And what we do is we think to ourselves, God, I put up this wall. You're welcome to come, Lord. There's a special gate on the side. But God's like, look, that gate doesn't work but one way, and that's for you to come out. You need to tear that wall down. Let me be the hedge around you to protect you, and stop trying to always keep everyone else out. And sometimes we just want people to get what they deserve. That's not what the Lord tells us, right? Luke 6:35 through 36 says, "But love your enemies and do good and lend." Oh, and this other piece really hurts right here. "And expect nothing in return." I mean, especially if we have anyone with Jewish roots in here. I know we have at least one. I mean, that really hurts because, think about it. I used to have two sisters growing up. They're my younger sisters. And they used to always love to ask me for money. "Hey, Kirk, I really want to go to the store and buy," I don't even remember what it was, "but I want to go buy this other thing, and can I borrow some money?" "Sure." Next time allowance came around, I'm like, "Okay, I'm ready for you to pony up. I need my money. I want to go get something now." "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm saving up for something else." It's like, what? Then they'd come back later and say, "Hey, can you borrow?" I'm like, "Absolutely not. You're cut off," right? But it says here, when we lend, expect nothing in return. And then it goes on to say, "And your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he himself is kind to the ungrateful and evil men. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful." Wow. Man, what would happen if I'd heard that when I was 10, 12 years old, when I had that allowance, and my sisters wouldn't stop borrowing it? Man. Mercy is being kind to those who offend us. Think about it. If Jake came over and told me that my cooking really stank and he didn't like it, told me that I was the worst grill master in the world, I needed to be merciful. I need to love him anyway. Don't get offended, right? Jude 1:22 through 23 says, "And have mercy on some who are doubting. Save others, snatching them out of the fire. And on some have mercy with fear, hating even the entanglement of the pollution by the flesh." I think in the other piece is one of the most difficult is building bridges with the unpopular. So a lot of times see ourselves in mercy, but we won't inconvenience ourselves when it's someone that we don't like. But the Word talks about we're supposed to reach all people. That mercy is reaching even those who are the unlovable. I would almost say, think about it like this. If the social rules say no, Jesus says yes. If it's not popular to go to the middle of the alleyways and tell the homeless person about Jesus and hand them a meal, probably it's something we're supposed to be doing. I know there's a lot of people that do outreach to homeless, but could even be like in Jesus' day, the leper, right? The leper was the worst of the worst. Yet when the leper came to Jesus, did he shun him? Did he turn him away? We see quite the opposite. They come over here, son. Let me give you a hug. Let me put my hands on you and pray for you. He got in the middle of it. Romans 13:10 says, love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law. I think one of the things we need to do as a church is to begin to chase after God in prayer and petition. I think Tuesday night is the perfect time to begin that thing. I believe what we need to do as a church is begin to chase after God like we haven't done in a long time. And I love the way Brian said it. We're not supposed to be like monks in a little corner acting kooky. You know, you don't have to look like Lou Engle. However, sometimes when I pray heavily, I do. But you pray like you're going to pray. Let the Holy Spirit use you in prayer to chase after His will for this nation, this city, this community, your neighbor, your family. Let me give you an example, and I'll try to close with this. My grandmother died when she was 80 years old, more or less. But she had been praying for probably 50 plus years for her son. Her son was a practicing homosexual, and she was extremely concerned for his salvation. Now, COVID hit, and my uncle began to pick up his Bible and begin to read it for himself. No one prompted him. And as he read through the Scriptures, Holy Spirit began to prick his heart. My grandmother's already dead at this point. She'd been pouring over in prayers and tears for many, many, many years. But Holy Spirit began to prick my uncle's heart as he read the Scriptures, and by himself in his house, my uncle literally said, Lord, I've been living a lie. I repent. I changed my mind about what's going on. And he will publicly tell you today that he used to be a practicing homosexual. But he will also tell you that he found God and that that's no longer who he is. Because he now knows what the truth is. He found it for himself in the Word. He stopped letting Google, YouTube, and everyone's opinions tell him what the Scripture said. Instead, he went to the Scripture himself and began to read it. And the Holy Spirit made it alive in front of him. And I'll tell you, my uncle used to be almost insufferable to be around. Not because of his lifestyle, but because of his personality. Now, when you sit and talk to him, it's like, dude, are you the same person? But this was the product of prayer. This was the product of intercession. This was the product of prayers that some people did not even see come to fulfillment. But I really feel deep in my heart, if we are diligent in prayer, we're going to begin to see God shake this community, this city, this state, even the nation, if we allow God to begin to pray through us. But we need to do it in unity, and we need to do it together.